off. Maybe we'll get something, maybe we won't, but that's just how it is right now. So the NIP5 specs, for anyone who doesn't know, that basically it's like a way to store your pub key on a server and to look up that information, and then you get basically something like an email address, like a Lightning address, so you could have, for example, Christoph@nostrnests.com, and that would allow a client to look up my pub key by going to nostrnest.com/.wellknown/nostr.json or something like that. Like it's like a way to look up the public key. And there's a standard around that where if there's only one key associated with a domain, you don't need the part in front of the @ So @bitcoin.design resolves correctly to the public key of the Bitcoin Design Community Nostr account. However, not all clients support this in the same way. Technically, you're supposed to have underscore @bitcoin.design. And currently, I think Damus doesn't support NIP5 at all. And in other clients, you might have to use @bitcoin.design or underscore @bitcoin.design in the search box to find the community profile.
That's pretty chaotic.
Yeah.
No, I found you. I thought I was already following Bitcoin Design, but apparently not. Yep. Cool. I just wanted to tag in a post.
Messy still. Yeah, and if you go to bitcoin.design/follow, there's a link to that one. To that
I have
Nostr
a public.
account.
Oh, sorry. I do have a Nostr account, and I do have a public key, but I don't know where to find it, to be honest.
Which client do you use?
I don't know which client. That's the thing, because I signed up one time.
Yeah.
And I remember being on a call with Art, actually, who's helping out with the UX research calls, and he actually guided me, and he was like, "That's your public key." But I don't remember the client. I just don't remember.
Do you have
it on mobile or computer?
Sorry?
Was it on a mobile app or on a computer?
On a computer. I'm on nostr.com now /clients, and I'm having a look at a few of their favorite clients. Coracle, Snort is the two web clients, and then they have Gossip as well. I'll probably just have to remember where I created it. I have no idea.
I mean, if you haven't posted anything and no one knows it, then it doesn't matter. You can just create a new key, and it's fine. They're disposable in a way.
So which client would you guys
if you haven't
recommend?
invested in it? Well, that's a difficult question there. Stephen, what's your favorite client?
Probably Snort.
Snort?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a new one that came out, or I stumbled upon, called primal.net. And that had I don't know about the onboarding flow, but it was very, very quick. But Mo, if you want to do it properly, then you don't actually create your private key in one of those clients, but you use an extension. So your private key is separate from the application that you interact with. For similar to Bitcoin, you want to keep those private keys in a very, very special place.
Snort was really quick. It was literally one click, and I have my public key in front of me. But as you said, to create the public key outside of the client, so how would you do that? I mean, this is a whole tutorial. I'll just stop asking questions.
So, for example, Albi, if you have the Albi extension, they automatically create some keys for you, Nostr keys.
Okay.
Yeah, so like I keep mine in Albi, and then like every time I visit Snort or Primal or Hamster or any other Nostr-enabled website, I just, Albi kind of pops up and is like, hey, do you want to allow this website to do something on your behalf? Like, do you want to, start downloading your, like looking at your post or whatever? Or do you want to sign this message? Or do you want to, send a message to somebody or whatever? So.
Yeah, so if you're, let me look that up real quick. I'm clicking on the Albi extension. I hit the menu. I go to accounts, Nests. Is that the right place?
This primal thing is this is fast. Holy crap.
Yeah, and then in accounts, you click on one of the accounts and then scroll down and it says Nostr there. There's a big header where you can grab your private key.
I will do that.
Yeah,
Primal just feels snappy.
it also has this explore section where it counts posts and stuff, look like real-time statistics.
Yeah.
I guess my network is 1,630 people, including accounts I follow and everyone they follow. So they must have built a pretty intense indexing backend there.
I like that you can see Jack Dorsey and Edward Snowden's feed. If you go into the settings page, you can choose which homepage feed you want to look at.
Yeah.
It makes sense because like all the follows and stuff are public. So yeah, you could totally, anyone could follow your feed and you could follow Jack's feed.
Yeah, it's actually interesting. There's a, hey, Johns, if anyone else wants to on the stage, just raise your hand there. It's interesting because I don't, so so there's a feature called lists where you can create mute and block lists if you just don't want to see certain people or things. And I think those are actually encrypted. So someone might have, so you might see someone's full feed, but they actually see a different feed. And if we get into this future where people pick their own algorithms, then it might look different again. So I think right now you get the full feed that this other person sees, but that might actually change. So what is that like?
The future is Nostr. We had a talk about that yesterday. One of the comments were like from Max. He said that it's kind of like we're rebuilding the web in a way. And Curious DK, actually really brilliant guy. He coined this term on, I don't know if from before or whatever, but it was kind of like the rewilding of the web, and kind of like bringing us back into those times when things were a bit more peer-to-peer. People were running their own servers, and there was just like crazy CSS stuff being done on MySpace and GeoCities. It kind of feels like that kind of culture is coming into the Bitcoin space now through Nostr.
Yeah, and hopefully the broader social media space.
Yeah, I mean, that's like the biggest problem with Nostr right now, that you said that it's on the Bitcoin space. Because it's like, no one on Nostr can talk about anything but Bitcoin and Nostr. Like, it's like any other piece of conversation on this, protocol.
Well, we're definitely early adopters and stuff. And actually, I'm kind of happy that the initial community is, for now, Bitcoiners. So then like Zaps will be Lightning Network, because it's not like Bitcoin isn't built into Nostr from the get-go. So yeah, I kind of like having this infrastructure where Lightning is starting to kind of like be adapted into it initially. But yeah.
I love that. Yeah, I love that we're integrating Lightning so tightly into these applications. It's wonderful.
But the other thing is, man, there's people coming over from other places for Nostr for Nostr specifically, and getting into Bitcoin from that. They're getting orange pill through the purple pill, they say. It is quite significant what's happening. Like that, hands down, it's pretty incredible.
How's the hackathon going, Johns?
It's going fantastically. There's a bunch of projects. This is a little different style than before. Like the first one we're in the Slack, then the other one we're in Discord. Now we're just kind of like all over the place with with Nostr or Twitter and whatnot. So by the way, if someone wants an idea of something to design and or build, please make the buffer, right? Like when you can schedule or tweet deck for Nostr. Just please. We need multiple people being able to access the same Nostr account to be able to publish from it without sharing the private key. So if someone designs that, I would be so happy. But yeah, it's going quite well so far. Ooh, what happened? Okay, there's image showing up there. Okay.
Yeah, I was just quietly messing around in the background with this description. I wanted to see if you can embed images in there.
Yeah, just
This is
upload.
the great not mirage. What's the word? Migration towards Nostr lands.
Man, this ostrich thing is really catching on. But yeah, I'm just like super excited to see what people are building. There's like some super creative stuff. There's some dev tools. There's some people are building or designing around there's a 10 Bitcoin bounty for creating a GitHub clone built on Nostr. So people are very excited about that. That's 1 billion sats. Our prices are nowhere close to that. But
What does that actually mean to build a GitHub clone? I have no idea what that actually means. For me, GitHub is, I use GitHub and it's like, I don't know, there are servers somewhere that stores all this information. I don't even know or care where
Yeah,
or who or how. And I really don't understand any of the internals of it.
sure. Okay.
spoken like a true
Designer.
no custodian. um, like it's like those
So
extensions, right? It's like I don't care where it is. I just want to be able to log in and see my blah blah blah.
yeah, so Christoph, think about it like this. GitHub is kind of like Twitter, and that it's, it's a platform run by a company. Um, users, create content and, host it on the platform, and it's global. So you can kind of discover, just like on Twitter, like on GitHub, you can just discover anybody in the world and kind of see what they're working on and all of that. And it's also this idea that like it's kind of always there. So, you kind of put tweets out into the public and it's like this public record, or so it's supposed to be. People use it. Same thing on GitHub. You put code out there for open source, and then if the maintainer steps down, then well, you can give the repository over to somebody else. But it's kind of always out there in the open. But it suffers from the same problems that Twitter does. Maybe not to the same extent, but it suffers from similar problems. And it's like, well, you have all this open source software out there, and then it has these great network effects because like Twitter is so easy to onboard to, and just be able to blast a message to anyone in the world. GitHub, you're able to onboard to it easily and blast out code to anyone out there in the world. But you have this problem with like, well, what if Microsoft started censoring open source projects? Okay, so then you can move to something like GitLab. So GitLab is kind of like Mastodon, right? Like you take Mastodon, you host Mastodon on your own server, you run a Mastodon instance, and you invite your friends to join your Mastodon instance, and maybe there's some way you can federate it and make it talk to another Mastodon instance, but they're kind of like these walled gardens. In practice, it's just like everyone kind of has their own Mastodon server, and they kind of don't really talk to each other. It's the same thing with like GitLab and stuff like that. You can run your own GitLab server and be responsible for hosting your own code repository, but it doesn't have the same social network effects that GitHub does. So the idea is if you move from, say, Twitter to Mastodon to Nostr, can you move from GitHub to GitLab to Git Nostr? So can you have the same global network effects that GitHub does without having the single point of failure? That's my
Yeah,
story.
thanks for the explanation. So Git, there is a protocol, and that's the same for GitLab and GitHub. Those are kind of ways to use that and store data. I guess what I was wondering is if let's say we have a Git Nostr Git thing, and I upload my code. Is that just some encrypted note that ends up somewhere on someone that I send out to 10 relays or so, or is it still would we still use Git, but Nostr kind of becomes the database for it? So it would still be Git. It would not be a replacement for Git.
Sure. I mean, a lot of this is up to the person who wins the bounty to determine this, but I think that a mix of both of those things. So I think you would still use Git, the protocol, right? Because when, Git is just a command line tool that you use on your computer, and you can actually use Git to talk to GitHub, to talk to GitLab, to talk to Bitbucket, to talk to all kinds of things. So it seems reasonable that you could have a code repository on your computer. You could make Git commits to it using the same Git tool that you always use. But maybe that final step is different, where instead of saying Git push Bitcoin design, right, maybe it's Git push, and then there's some Nostr tool that kind of intercepts it. And instead of sending it to one Git server, it sends it to 10 Git servers. So maybe some relays are like, well, we're Git Nostr relays, and you can send us Git pushes, and then we'll propagate it to like other Nostr clients or other relays or something like that. So you're still using Git to make the commit and do the versioning and your branches and all this, that, and the other. I think it's just a matter of it's not being hosted on one place. You're using Nostr relays to be able to host it.
I think it's called Gnoster. Git Nostr.
I like it. Gnoster, that's good. Yeah.
Oh,
The
okay.
names are getting better by the day.
Well, since I'm on I'm a bit on a roll now. Since I have your attention, maybe people. I'm trying to ask people what they what do you call what's the verb for similar to tweet within the Nostr ecosystem? What's the verb that people should be using?
Post.
Post. You're going for post?
Yeah, because you can build all kinds of different applications around it. So, but that's the thing. If you have there's the long form type of node also, which is basically a blog post or an article. So I don't think you're going to have just one word for it.
Okay. Steven, do you have any suggestions?
Yeah, not really. I'd make go with Christoph on that. It's a lot of different types of content that's on Nostr, so I think it might be a little too early to say.
Okay. Well, Daniel, you got any, Daniel?
So we have kind of Nostred for about a half hour here. I'd be curious if anyone wants to talk about some of the going-ons in the community. Did I get disconnected?
Yep, I can hear you loud and clear.
You can hear me?
I mean, people. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we can totally do that. I think there are two topics we could potentially cover. It seems like Daniel's now on a bike. He moved to the audience. There are two things we could talk about. Either we continue down the Nostr route and kind of focus more on Bitcoin and design, which is kind of related to John's hackathon because there's a lot of overlap and I think there's some interesting patterns emerging with SAPs and other things. Or we take the route to the Bitcoin Design newsletter and what's happening there. What would you on this stage would like to do?
Down with whatever.
Same as Steven.
To complicate your life, Christoph, I'm down with whatevs too.
Okay, it's not an option. Decide something.
No opinion coming from me.
This is hilarious.
Do you want to? That sounds good.
Yeah.
So, do you want to? Were you exploring discussions about Bitcoin design as it relates to Nostr and ways that these two technologies can integrate? Is that kind of where you were hoping to take this?
So personally, I think that's really interesting. And since we're in this Nostr Nest, I also think it's kind of appropriate along with the hackathon.
Okay. Cool.
And I was
Let's do it.
wondering if we could simply start by maybe outlining what those intersections are in the first place and why they even exist. Like, why does this whole thing lend itself? Nostr is a separate protocol. Like, what are the connections between to Bitcoin? And a couple of things that I see, and then maybe you guys can and gals can chip in. One is that it was created by people in the Bitcoin space with similar thoughts and ideas and the mentality and principles. Then there's some overlap, like the private key, public key creation. You can create a Bitcoin key based on 12 words, and you can also create your Nostr key on 12 words. So there's a little bit of borrowing happening, which could lead to similar UX patterns. And then the micropayments. If like an Nostr handle, the NIPT05 looks pretty much same like a Lightning address, which, for example, makes it very clean for Alby to integrate that feature. And then I don't know, with the Zaps, has that and making Lightning micropayments over Nostr, is that simply because Bitcoiners are kind of settling on Nostr and driving the technology forward, or is there more overlap there, or deeper connections in the protocol?
I think we can take a step back to one of the first points that you brought up, right, about it being created by people in the Bitcoin space and how that cultural alignment, in a way, kind of like direct some of these design patterns or whatever, or uses for Bitcoin within Nostr. If you guys in the audience didn't know, Nostr was created by Fiatjaf and like part of the Diagon Alley project from Ben Ark. They were exploring marketplaces, how to create a resilient marketplace. What does resilient mean? I guess that's basically, your store can't necessarily be shut down. So it could just keep on popping up all over all the time. So that was the kind of like the example that was given is like the Pirate Bay, even though there's no the main organization or people who launched this website before, even though it's closed down, clones of it keep popping up. So resilience means redundancy in the data stored in multiple places. But anyway, so that cultural alignment kind of like birthed some of these patterns, I believe. Would you say that would be accurate, Christoph?
So I'm actually, yes. I only on the Bolt Fun video today, I learned that Jeff didn't just come up with this thing, out of the blue, just for fun, but it kind of grew out of this Diagon Alley project, which is an LNbits extension. If you go to LNbits, GitHub/LNbits/Diagon-Alley, there's that code. And that Nostr is kind of it made this Diagon Alley protocol more generic, and then it became its own thing out of that. So that makes perfect sense to me. And it also makes perfect sense that Ben Ark with his infinite tinkering through LNbits, that these interesting things come out of it.
Yeah, and I think why also not just on the philosophical side, why the cultural side is even more deep into it goes into practical realm, is Bitcoin needs a transport layer for some kind of arbitrary data, right? Because then we can start unlocking some very interesting use cases within Bitcoin. Need I say contactless? But for example, I see Andrew Biggin here. There's these different community banking stuff that Galoy has been pushing out and popularizing, right? Though fair enough, it's one thing to have a community kind of like siloed with its custodians and its community members and stuff like that, but maybe interesting things can happen economically if communities are able to communicate with one another now, right? But how should that be done? Should that be stored as an inscription? Should that be stored? Should that be transported through the Lightning Network? Right? How do we make a resilient? How do we make these communities resilient and also networked up with one another? Well, if we have a transport layer like Nostr, not saying that it's the only option out there or whatever, but through something like that and through it now, as it's gaining popularity, we can start connecting different things within Bitcoin. For example, there's certain types of transaction that needs coordination between multiple people. We have to be constantly on, like both of us have to be online to do those things, right? To have the best experience. For example, if you want a multi-sig with like 10 different people or 999 different people, how are you going to coordinate that? Passing a file one by one to everyone, or getting that same PSBT file transported it to an area that everyone else can access, everyone in that group, all the members can access. And as they come online, they're able to pull down this data and add their signature, and then whoever else comes in an asynchronous manner, signing this transaction until it's got enough signatures. So that's just an example of how this transport layer can open up Bitcoin for all different types of cool design patterns, I think.
Yeah, I do think with the daily spending wallet in the Bitcoin design guide, there were just a whole bunch of places where we're always like, we need some communication between wallets or people for this. And then always the question is, well, what do you use? You're gonna copy your PSBT into Telegram, or if you're not in front of each other, you can't use a QR code to communicate. And this is like a very Nostr is loose enough in just the right ways that you could potentially tape things together to make some of this stuff happen. But I don't know, maybe too early to tell, but certainly very promising.
So I'm going to be the one asking questions here because I'm totally new to Nostr, and maybe it's useful that I ask questions, because if there's anyone else on the call that's also new to Nostr like myself, then maybe this might answer some questions you have. The public key that I just generated, so I hopped on to get Albi, I generated a public key. Went really well because they have really good documentation on how to generate a key. So generated that, copied it over, emailed it to myself. So now I have this public key, and is that public key my kind of, I don't know, you would equate it to your Twitter handle that everyone can kind of recognize me by, regardless of which Nostr client I use?
Pretty close, but not quite. I would say
Okay.
that you have your Twitter handle that people recognize you by, and that's like the user-friendly, human-facing thing people recognize you by.
Yeah.
Under the hood, there's probably, some kind of, within Twitter's database under the hood, there's like some kind of complicated database generated, unique number. That's your real identifier. I
Right.
think that the npub, in my mind, is more analogous to that. It is a completely unique identifier for you, like as an entity on Nostr. Will it always be the human-facing thing we see? I don't know. People
Right.
are trying to innovate things around that, like in your profile, you can give yourself a username. We have the NIP5 thing, which basically looks like an email address. And, so mine's Stephen at Delorme, just, it's basically is my email address as well. And you can punch in my email address in an Nostr client and it'll pull me up. And maybe there's other things we haven't thought of yet, but so yes, I think that's pretty close assessment.
So it's
Yeah.
like this
And
identifier that, sorry, yeah, go ahead.
yeah, I was just going to add. So when Stephen says you can find him by the Stephen at Delorme, under the hood, with their client goes to Steven's server and says, hey, what's the npub of Steven? And then the client uses that npub to check all the different relays and says, hey, just give me all the stuff that Steven posted here. And then it puts that together into your feed or whatever the client's displaying. So under the hood, it still uses that unique ID.
So if Steven posts to different Nostr clients, it will show up all on one client. It will just stream all of that into the various clients.
That's correct.
Yeah, so when Steven posts something, he puts it on relays, which are just random people running servers that basically said, hey, here's a server, you can send me stuff, and I will, if someone asks for it, I will send it to them. And so Steven will say, okay, I'm going to put my profile, my posts on these 10 relays over here because I think they're amazing. And then your client goes out and talks to a bunch of relays and says, hey, do you have something from Steven under this npub? And if they have something, they'll send it to you. And then your client will show that to you. If you ask the wrong relays, then you will not find anything. And that is one of the tricky bits about this architecture.
This is some interesting stuff. Wow. Okay. Thank you for answering my question.
But yeah, your basic, I think, assessment was correct that like I can publish using any Nostr client I want, and you can read using any Nostr client you want. So similar to with a Bitcoin key, you could take a Bitcoin key, and I could load it into, I could load it with Blue Wallet, or I could, load it into like I don't know. Give me another name of an on-chain wallet, like Unchained or Casa or something like that. I mean, I could use the same key with a different piece of software. Same thing with Nostr. I can use the same Nostr key with different pieces of software.
Right.
Yeah. So the interest, if we think about in traditional social media, it's like I use Instagram and you use Twitter and Steven uses, I don't know, Snapchat. But we all see the same information. Like they load their information from the same places. We just look at it in a different way with a different client. Right now, they're all siloed, right? They all have their own servers. But imagine they all had the same servers and the same information, and we just choose different ways to look at it.
Which makes so much more sense. It feels a little bit like, I'm trying to think of something visual. It feels a little bit like, how they have these applications that sort of pull in all of your feeds from different, or all of your, it connects Discord with Slack, with Mattermost. So all of your messages would come in. It feels a little bit like it's a little bit in line with that kind of pooling everything instead of, having it across multiple channels, needing to open up various applications to do the same thing. You're posting to LinkedIn, you're posting to Twitter, you're posting within the Bitcoin design community. You would post to one place and the network would make sure that it gets distributed via the relays. Did I say that correctly?
Yeah. And let's hop over to the Bitcoin side of this. I'm gonna add another link here to the list at the top. It just takes me a second. Let me see. Done. There should be a link now that's called Damus Saps. So this is another thing that some of these clients now have built-in lightning tipping. So imagine it's like Twitter. You see someone's post and you can like it, you can retweet it, all this stuff, but you can also directly with one click send them some saps. And that is, John's also with Bolt Fund spend a lot of time on these interactions. Just how do you make that smooth? Because maybe you want to send 10, I want to send 50, Steven wants to send 1 million. And in this link, there are all kinds of interesting design explorations there. John's, what are some design explorations happening around Nostr Bitcoin stuff in the hackathon?
Oh, Nostr Bitcoin stuff in the hackathon. You're putting me on the spot here, man. I'm trying to just run
Is Zaps pretty much it? Is it confined to that, or are we seeing more?
Yeah, so I think a lot of people are heads down, kind of like building in secret and stuff like that for now. I did see some rumblings of some LNC based stuff, Lightning Node Connect from Lightning Labs. Evan from there is trying some stuff. There's a contact list being designed inside of what do you call it? Inside of Zeus as well. That's going to be a hackathon project for the next couple of weeks. So contact list, finally, we're getting it. But yeah, super excited for that. But what else? What else did I see? Um, there was a couple more. But I guess something that is going to be really important on a like infrastructure level is and I think there's a project relating to this as well. How do you make this Lightning address less custodial or even non-custodial? Now, the thing about Lightning address is that it can be used perfectly fine in a non-custodial fashion if you are running your own node. So I think the ultimate question there is, how do we encourage people to run their own nodes, right? And then the other question is how technically you would be able to, and how securely would you be able to run a HTTP server for that Lightning node? Um, so, so yeah, there's so many options for that, but it is a space that I hope we can see some development during the hackathon.
Yeah, I think Stephen, you were just talking about that in the Bolt 12 and async payments jam session, right?
Yeah, I mean, I tend to think about things like LNURL is cool, and I think like Lightning address, works today, and we can use it today. But as John's pointed out, it has I wouldn't say it's custodial. Like these things can be, there's a lot more nuance to these things. It's like there's just like different trust assumptions with it. So the one thing is that if you're not like running your own server that actually responds to the request for the Lightning address lookup, then that server could quietly, if they became evil one day, could redirect it to a different Lightning node or a different LNURL endpoint. So I think that Bolt12 could provide a solution to that. Ultimately, people who want to run their own servers and run their own nodes should do that. Should be free to do that. Then we also have sometimes users who we might just want to onboard quickly by downloading an app off the App Store. And so how do we serve them? Well, if they're running a lightweight Lightning node on that phone with that app that they download and it supports Bolt 12, then that'll be one good thing because Bolt 12 offers are reusable. And then one thing we could do to improve that, maybe, as work continues on this sort of thing, is by adding in something like async payments, which would allow the phone to be able to receive Lightning payments, air quotes receive, not actually receive Lightning payments when the phone is offline, but it would allow it to basically have the LSP hold the payment for them in a non-custodial manner and then send it to them when they turn the phone back on and get back online. So that was probably more technical gibberish than you really wanted, but what I'm really getting at is that I think there's a way that we could pretty easily use Bolt 12 offers in a very similar fashion to Lightning address. So Bolt 12 offer just becomes a string, just a string of text like anything else. And one way you imagine this working is with Nostr, we have a profile update events. So and you could put metadata in your profile, like give your own username and stuff like that. So could we just put a Bolt 12 offer inside of a profile update event? So could you have a wallet and it's like, there's a little, button in the wallet that's like, hey, add this to my Nostr profile. And, boop, it makes an offer, broadcasts it, to your Nostr profile. And then then inside the Nostr client, it could just render as, click here to pay Johns. Another way you could do it is do something kind of like a Bolt 12 address, a very similar kind of thing where you've got something that looks like an email address and the client just pings the person's server, checks to figure out what the offer is, and then pays it that way. And that's kind of, it has one improvement. It can suffer from some similar problems as Lightning address where, if the person running that server becomes evil, then they could put a different offer, like their own offer there, and steal your funds that way. But the way that it would be an improvement in my mind is that you don't necessarily need to look up, like with Nostr NIP 5 right now. When you punch in Steven at Delorme to look me up, the Nostr client doesn't check my NIP 5 every single time it follows me. It stores the npub and then just follows the npub. And so a very similar kind of thing. You could have like a Bolt 12 address where it looks up the Bolt 12 offer on the person's website the first time, or on something like Nostr Plebs or whatever service. It looks at the Bolt 12 offer the first time and then just caches that locally. So that way, even if the person running, let's call it the Bolt 12 server, the Bolt 12 address server, even if they become evil, then the Bolt 12 offer is cached locally. And so I think you could use some very, very similar design patterns that we're already seeing with Lightning Address and also with Nostr. You could use those very similar design patterns to make Bolt 12 work. And I think that would offer some improvements for mobile Lightning nodes.
Yeah, and NIP 5 is using like the same format of internet identifier, like email addresses, like Lightning addresses. The Bolt 12 address or whatever people decide to call it can, also mimic the same thing. And if they want to put a $sign instead or whatever, doesn't matter. But what also becomes interesting here is that it doesn't necessarily need an upgrade to Lightning Address. Lightning Address stayed exactly the same. NIP 5 is something else. They're using the same format. And the result is I'm querying this space, the server, whatever it is, give me back something, and give me back some address or some invoice or something like that. So I can see it. I can see there be some kind of like lessen of the load on the cognitive load for the users if we kind of like follow like patterns that are becoming popular now as well. On the trust assumptions, as you were talking, I'm also starting to realize that, we say that the service provider can, the server provider, they can intercept the Bitcoin address or the Lightning address or the invoice or whatever and replace it with another one. But at the end of the day, it's definitely, as Steven said, you're shifting your like who you trust around, because the ISP could pretty much do the same thing, right? It's we just feel like we trust ISPs more than random people on the internet, which is valid maybe, but it's definitely not a simple kind of like don't trust, verify kind of situation that we're going for.
You're right. I mean, DNS level attacks are pretty, that's, I think there would be incentive to do that now that we're basically putting money on the internet. DNS attacks become much more profitable if you manage to pull one off. The one caveat I get there is probably leading us away from designer land and into technical land. But I would say that if you're making a request to look up Lightning address Bolt 12, it's going to be in a query string like after the domain name, so that should all be encrypted. With TLS and a modern web development flow. So I don't think that there's a way that an ISP could say like redirect traffic or something like that for a specific Lightning address, Bolt 12 address, NIP 5, this whatever. But they could, say for a specific domain, be like, okay, well, we want to censor this domain, or like a redirect requests that are going to, like let's say some ISPs like, well, we're evil and we don't like nostrplebs.com, so we're going to make up a fake nostrplebs and we're going to route all traffic to fake nostrplebs. Something like that's totally plausible. Again, it's like a different trust assumption. It's like, well, they can't censor like one person in that case, but they can't like hijack one person, but they can hijack like a whole community of people.
Yeah, exactly. I think another angle with this, with the public-private key kind of a setup that we're kind of like seeing getting popular outside of just the money transfer, and now it's going into like this data, is that, you know, we have this big problem online of misinformation, AI generated content, as well as images and deep fakes and all that. Maybe there's also a space for designers to use some of these schemes to verify that, you know, something was published by whichever person that they're interacting with. I think that also becomes quite interesting there as well. I know,
Yeah,
Christoph. Christoph.
That's also a good one. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, you've been doing a lot of this AI work. Like, have you ever thought about the signing and verifying of like different generative data that you come up with?
No, I haven't at all. I mean, so the AI image generation work I do is for Saving Satoshi, which is at savingsatoshi.com. It's a demo. Don't take it too serious. But there's some. My whole process is basically everything that I do. Every prompt I generate is in a Figma file, which is also shared somewhere in the Slack channel in the Bitcoin Design Slack. So I mean, there's nothing special because I'm trying to keep it a very collaborative process. So I have this Figma file with 10 different pages, one for each chapter of the project, and in there are like, I don't know, 50 different images that were generated with the exact prompts used underneath and a link to the Discord image. So if anyone wants to contribute to that one, it's all out there. So I don't know. I don't generate this AI art for to establish myself as an artist or anything. I have no attachment to that in that way. And I don't have that in general with my design work that I do. It's all pretty much up for anyone to remix and work with.
That's good thinking though, John. So, I mean, like I think in the AI art community, everyone is very like they really want to share what they're doing. That seems to be the default because I think even though some people go around like, oh, I'm an artist, no, maybe not. I don't know, philosophical question, but while some people like get pretentious about it and call themselves artists, most people in AI art, I don't think feel like they're artists. I think they feel like they're participating in this fun thing with everyone else, and they want to like share their process. And so like, I feel like people just like share their prompts very, very openly. Like the whole like Mid-Journey platform has contributed to this, but just AI art at large. I mean, I feel like people are just very open with sharing how they got to specific things. I think where you're talking about Jonzo is going to come into effect is like deep fakes and stuff. And like, do we get to a point where it actually, becomes in the digital space really difficult to tell like which news is real and which news isn't because we're being constantly assaulted with not only AI generated photographs that didn't exist, but also AI generated news stories. And maybe, some, threat actor could take an AI and program it to basically create, like, I want to execute this given agenda. So create news stories and news articles on a daily basis and flood the internet with them. Things are going to get pretty wild, but I think, Bitcoin and Nostr are going to play a role in that because, like, one, you can use Satoshis for rate limiting. I mean, it could be a spam control mechanism where now that we have a native internet money, that's one way to cut out misinformation and scamming and stuff like that. Is that you're gonna have to pay really heavily if you want to get that stuff out there at scale. You're gonna have to pay with the scarcest, best monetary asset in the world. And then, another thing too is, I mean, like with Nostr now, if you more and more things start to integrate Nostr, then you can filter out information that doesn't come from in pubs that you trust. So I don't know. There's interesting stuff to look at there, I think.
I mean, I don't know how you feel about the internet, but forever now, I basically go by the assumption that pretty much everything is nonsense until proven otherwise.
There's a couple features Stephen mentioned, like rate limiting. There's certain there's definitely ways in which you can like fake the timestamp on a not. I call them Noost, by the way, Noost. I want to see if that's gonna catch on and like check the temperature for it, but I'm going for Noost. Okay, I don't care about notes or event or post. It's Noost for me at least. You can come jump on the Noost train if you'd like, but then you'll get your Noost boosted. Boost your Noost. But anyway, I'm finished Dr. Seussing. I I kind of forgot where I started with it. We're on the hour. I'm down to continue chatting if you guys are, but maybe we should either like invite some people up to find out if they want to continue chatting, or they could throw some reactions in there, or we end it. It's up to you guys.
I have to bail now, but
Yeah, so do I. But while you guys have been chatting, I was exploring different Nostr clients. It's really interesting because I found Snort Social to be quite glitchy in terms of saving my profile, and then I've just kept on switching and rotating until I found one that kind of worked well. So I think there's a lot of design challenges and a lot of opportunities for UX designers to make a difference in all of these different clients, whether it's web or mobile and so on. But once again, it's new, so there's a lot of room for development.
Yeah,
But it works for amazingly well for being so young.
Yep.
It does. I agree with you fully. Yeah, it's super simple to use. It's super simple to use. And all of the different clients have their own. What I was noticing is that since I generated my key outside, as was suggested by you guys, when I signed up to all of these different web clients, I wasn't getting immediately the option to use my self-generated key. They were just automatically generating for me. So that wasn't possible on some of them in the sign-up process. So that's interesting. But yeah, that's just my 2 cents. I was just fiddling around.
What's the sense you keep talking about? What about like we need to do sats around here? What's the
Yeah,
sats?
you should get a Bitcoin tattoo on your forehead. You're hilarious.
You don't
2
put a
sats.
tattoo on a, you don't put a tattoo on a Bentley, darling. The darling
Oh my
one.
goodness.
The darling one is what adds to the sass.
This is so funny. This is comedy evening. Oh, I love it.
All right.
So real
Love it.
quick before you head out, Nostr Nests, good, bad? What do you think? Anyone in the audience too? Feel free to post the poop emoji or 100 or whichever one you like.
I'm
Andrew
down
is
for
One
it.
100s, one poop. Marina's still thinking.
Not sure.
Okay.
this is way better than Twitter
Yeah.
Spaces. It hasn't glitched out once on us.
100%.
And I can use it from my computer like a decent, reasonable human being would. I don't know why Twitter Spaces won't let you participate if you're not on a phone. It's kind of a strange limitation.
And this was released a couple weeks ago.
Well, but it's also modification of an existing software. Like someone built an open source Twitter Spaces, and then the Nostr plebs kind of modified it with the Nostr aspect to it. But yeah, it's been around a couple months, I think, but it had a different name before.
Okay. Well, we're definitely seeing nostrification of the web. So
Hyper-nostrification.
Hyper-nostrification, exactly. All right,
And with
guys.
that, I leave you. Later.
Thanks for joining, Stephen. Thanks for joining, Mo.
Cheers.
Thanks
Bye,
for
guys.
joining, Johns. I'm going to stop the recording now. Let's see if I